Buried beneath the endless white dunes of New Mexico's White Sands National Park lies one of the most extraordinary archaeological discoveries in American history. Ancient human footprints, frozen in time, perfectly preserved in hardened mud. They whisper a story that shatters everything we thought we knew about human migration to this continent. For years, fierce scientific debates have raged over their true age. But groundbreaking new analysis published in June 2025 now confirms what many refuse to believe. These are the oldest known human footprints in the Americas, pushing back the timeline of human presence on this continent by a staggering 10,000 years. The history books, they're about to be rewritten. The story begins in 2009 when park rangers at White Sands National Park stumbled upon unusual impressions embedded in the dried earth near Alkali Flat, an ancient lake bed stretching across the Tularosa Basin. At first, these mysterious indentations seemed like they could be anything. Perhaps tracks left by woolly mammoths trudging through Ice Age wetlands, or maybe the enormous footfalls of giant ground sloths that once dominated this landscape, or even the prowling marks of saber-toothed cats stalking their prey through the marshes. But as archaeologists carefully examined these impressions, analysing every ridge, every toe impression, every anatomical detail, they made a discovery that would send shockwaves through the scientific world. These weren't animal tracks at all. They were human footprints, the unmistakable impressions of men, women and children who walked this very land thousands of years before the great pyramids of Egypt pierced the sky or the magnificent cities of ancient Mesopotamia rose from the desert sands. Imagine that. Human beings, just like us, leaving their mark in a world we can barely comprehend. To truly understand why this discovery matters so profoundly, we need to journey back in time to step into the frozen world these ancient people inhabited. Around 23,000 years ago, Earth was gripped in the savage cold of the last glacial maximum, the most brutal chapter of the last ice age. Imagine a world where massive ice sheets, some over 2 miles thick, smothered much of North America, Europe, and Asia. Sea levels plunged approximately 400 feet lower than today, exposing vast continental shelves that are now submerged beneath our oceans. For decades, scientists believed they had figured out how humans first reached North America. The prevailing theory was simple. The ancestors of today's Native Americans crossed a land bridge called Berinia, a frozen expanse stretching between Siberia and Alaska, walking into a new world around 13,000 to 16,000 years ago. This was accepted fact, taught in every classroom, printed in every textbook. But revolutionary new evidence is tearing that theory apart. Emerging research suggests that ancient peoples may have actually arrived by boat, navigating treacherous Pacific coastlines in simple watercraft, following what archaeologists now call the Kelp Highway. These coastal routes offered abundant resources, fish teeming in cold waters, seals basking on rocky shores, and nutrient-rich seaweed providing sustenance. More importantly, these maritime routes allowed people to bypass the impenetrable ice sheets and reach southern regions like White Sands far faster than any land journey could. Whether they came by foot across frozen tundra or by boat along icy coasts, one thing is now undeniable. These courageous pioneers brought humanity to a continent exploding with life and limitless possibilities, and they arrived far, far earlier than we ever imagined. But here's something that might surprise you. The area around White Sands wasn't a frozen wasteland during this period. Far from it. This was a lush, thriving wetland ecosystem fed by the ancient Lake Otero, a massive paleolake that dominated the Tularosa Basin during the Ice Age. Picture this, where today you see only endless dunes of brilliant white gypsum sand. There once existed a verdant oasis, attracting incredible diversity of life. Ancient camels wandered the shorelines, their humps silhouetted against Ice Age skies. Dire wolves, those massive predators immortalized in popular culture, prowled the grasslands hunting for prey. Giant armadillos, creatures weighing hundreds of pounds, lumbered through the vegetation. Columbian mammoths, towering beasts standing 14 feet tall, trumpeted across the landscape, and everywhere grasses waved in ancient winds while coniferous trees dotted the horizon. It was in this rich, abundant world that humans thrived, leaving their indelible mark in the soft mud along the lakeshore. These weren't just passing through, they were living here, hunting here, raising their children here, creating the oldest known human footprints in the Americas. This was their home. In 2021, a team of researchers led by the University of Arizona published their initial groundbreaking study, and the scientific community erupted. They employed radiocarbon dating, an ingenious technique that measures the remaining amount of carbon-14 in organic materials like ancient plants or animals. Here's how it works. Carbon-14 is a radioactive isotope that decays at a perfectly consistent rate, like a cosmic clock that never stops ticking. By measuring how much carbon-14 remains in a sample, scientists can calculate precisely how long ago that organism died. It's remarkably elegant. At White Sands, the research team dated tiny seeds of ditch grass, scientifically known as Rupia serosa, a water-dwelling plant they discovered embedded in the exact same sediment layers as the mysterious footprints. The seeds whispered their secret. The tracks were between 21,000 and 23,000 years old. Let that sink in. 23,000 years. This finding didn't just raise eyebrows in the archaeological community, it ignited a firestorm of controversy that would rage for years. Almost immediately, skeptical scientists began attacking the findings, and their concerns weren't without merit. The problem? Ditch grass grows underwater, submerged beneath the lake surfaces, and water can contain ancient carbon leached from rocks and sediments that have been locked away for millennia. When aquatic plants absorb this old carbon during their lifetime, radiocarbon dating can produce artificially inflated ages. Think of it like using a clock that started ticking thousands of years before the actual event you're trying to measure. It's fundamentally misleading. In 2022, a scathing rebuttal was published, arguing that the ditch grass dates might be catastrophically skewed by this reservoir effect, casting serious doubt on the astonishing 23,000-year claim. The debate intensified. Academic conferences became battlegrounds. Research papers flew back and forth like arrows. The White Sands footprints had become the most hotly contested discovery in American archaeology, dividing the scientific community into warring camps. Everything was at stake. The entire understanding of human migration to the Americas hung in the balance. But the White Sands research team refused to back down. Determined to prove their findings beyond any reasonable doubt, they returned to the site with new weapons in their scientific arsenal. In 2023, they deployed a completely different dating method called optically stimulated luminescence, mercifully abbreviated as OSL. This technique is fascinating. It measures when minerals like quartz or feldspar grains in sediment were last exposed to sunlight. Since the ancient footprints were pressed into mud that was subsequently buried under layers of sediment, OSL could reveal precisely when that mud was still exposed on the surface, when human feet were actually pressing into it. But they didn't stop there. The team also radiocarbon dated ancient conifer pollen, microscopic grains from pine, spruce, and fir trees preserved in the footprint. Layers. This was crucial. Unlike problematic ditch grass, pollen comes from land plants that absorb carbon directly from the atmosphere, completely avoiding the treacherous old carbon contamination issue that plagued the earlier results. The results? Both independent methods converged on the exact same conclusion. The footprints were 21,000 to 23,000 years old. The evidence was becoming overwhelming, but the skeptics weren't finished yet. They demanded more proof, more certainty, more converging lines of evidence. The battle for scientific truth continued, but then came the knockout punch. A new study published in June 2025 in the prestigious journal Science Advances aimed to obliterate any remaining doubt once and for all. The same dedicated researchers from the University of Arizona returned to White Sands in 2022 and 2023, this time armed with a different strategy entirely. They drilled deep core samples, long cylindrical tubes of earth extracted from the site itself, focusing not on problematic plants, but on the ancient mud itself, the very sediment that preserved the footprints. These precious samples were sent to two completely independent laboratories for analysis, eliminating any possibility of bias or error from a single source. Both labs returned virtually identical results. The mud dates between 2700 and 2400 years ago, aligning perfectly with all previous findings. Think about the weight of this evidence. The research teams now possess 55 separate radiocarbon dates, spanning mud, seeds, and pollen, all analyzed by different laboratories using different techniques, and every single one points to the exact same time period. As lead researcher Vance Holliday stated with understated scientific precision, it would be serendipity in the extreme to have all these dates giving you a consistent picture that's in error. Translation: the odds of all these independent tests being simultaneously wrong are astronomically impossibly low. The footprints are real. The dates are accurate. The case is closed. But who were these remarkable people leaving their footprints in the White Sands mud 23,000 years ago? Close your eyes and imagine them. They were likely small bands of hunter-gatherers, nomadic families of perhaps 20 or 30 individuals constantly moving across the landscape, following migrating herds of Ice Age megafauna and gathering edible plants to survive another harsh day. The footprints themselves reveal intimate, heartbreaking details of their lives. Some impressions are remarkably small, tiny prints suggesting young children scampering playfully through the wet mud, perhaps chasing each other, laughing in a language lost to time. Other footprints are significantly larger, made by adults perhaps carrying heavy loads of meat from successful hunts, or tools crafted from stone and bone. One particularly poignant trackway shows something incredibly human, a person slipping in the slick mud, stumbling, catching themselves, then continuing on. Another track sequence tells an even more moving story. It appears to show a woman or teenage boy walking over a mile with a very young toddler, sometimes carrying the exhausted child on their hip, sometimes setting them down to walk independently. You can see where the adult slipped under the extra weight. You can see where they stopped to rest. This isn't just archaeology. These are real people with real lives, with hopes and fears and love for their children. They're us, just separated by 23,000 years. Their presence here raises one profound, haunting question that keeps archaeologists awake at night. How did they reach this place? Scientists continue debating the route these ancient pioneers took to reach White Sands. The Bering Land Bridge theory remains compelling. This vast tundra corridor connecting Siberia and Alaska was open between approximately 30,000 and 15,000 years ago, and it could have served as humanity's gateway to a new world. Early migrants descended from Asian populations who had survived millennia in the brutal Siberian wilderness may have crossed this frozen bridge, perhaps following enormous herds of migrating woolly mammoths or desperately seeking new hunting territories as their old lands became overhunted. Some intrepid bands might have trekked inland through the continent's interior, discovering narrow gaps between the massive ice sheets that covered most of North America, threading through these icy passages like needles through fabric. But increasingly, archaeologists believe many ancient peoples traveled by boat, constructing simple but effective watercraft and courageously navigating the treacherous Pacific coastline. These coastal routes, rich with kelp forests teeming with marine life, offered reliable food sources and remarkably fast travel compared to arduous overland journeys. Whether they arrived on foot across Beringia's frozen expanse or by boat along wave-battered shores, these early Americans demonstrated absolutely extraordinary adaptability, resilience, and courage. They reached what is now New Mexico by 23,000 years ago, leaving behind the oldest confirmed human footprints in the Americas. They were the true pioneers of this continent. For nearly a century, American archaeology operated under a seemingly unshakable paradigm. Archaeologists universally believed that the first Americans were the Clovis people, who appeared around 13,000 years ago, instantly recognizable by their distinctive fluted spear points that have been found scattered across the continent. This was established fact, but the White Sands footprints, combined with an avalanche of other recent discoveries, have shattered this long-held consensus. Consider the mounting evidence: 1,500-year-old stone tools discovered in Texas, 30,000-year-old archaeological sites excavated in Mexico, evidence of human presence spreading across the Americas thousands of years earlier than the Clovis culture existed. The paradigm is crumbling. However, some scientists remain understandably cautious, even in the face of overwhelming evidence. They argue, not unreasonably, that the radiocarbon dates, even those derived from ancient mud, might still potentially be affected by traces of old carbon dissolved in the prehistoric lake bed. It's a legitimate scientific concern. Others point to a genuinely puzzling mystery. Where are the tools? Where are the campsites? Where are the stone points? The butchered animal bones, the hearths, the refuse piles, all the normal archaeological evidence that screams people lived here. Clovis sites typically yield hundreds of distinctive artifacts, but at White Sands, the footprints stand hauntingly alone, preserved in mud but accompanied by nothing else. It's genuinely strange. Vance Holliday, a distinguished member of the research team and a professor emeritus who has dedicated nearly 50 years to studying the peopling of the Americas, offers a logical and compelling explanation for this apparent absence of artifacts. Hunter-gatherers, he argues, were extraordinarily careful with their precious tools. In this remote region, far from reliable sources of high-quality stone suitable for tool-making, these people wouldn't casually abandon valuable implements in a muddy wetland area. These people live by their artifacts, Holliday explains with the patience of someone who has spent decades studying ancient humans. They're not just randomly dropping them. It's not logical to me that you're going to see a debris field. It's a reasonable argument grounded in understanding human behavior. But despite this logical explanation, the conspicuous absence of traditional artifacts continues to fuel the ongoing debate, giving ammunition to those who remain unconvinced. The scientific conversation continues as it should. That's how science works. The truth is, the White Sands footprints aren't isolated anomalies. They're part of a genuine revolution sweeping through American archaeology, fundamentally transforming our understanding of this continent's deep human history. Across the Americas, from the frozen north to the southern tip, stunning new discoveries are systematically pushing back the timeline of human arrival. In Chile, the Monteverde site, definitively dated to 14,500 years ago, preserves incredible evidence of coastal adaptation, including remains of edible seaweed and impressions of wooden structures built by maritime peoples. In Idaho, the Cooper's Ferry site yielded 16,000-year-old stone tools buried beneath volcanic ash layers. In Mexico, the Chiquihuite Cave, high in the mountains, may contain stone flakes and primitive tools dating to an absolutely mind-blowing 30,000 years ago. Though critically, no human footprints have been discovered there yet to definitively prove human presence. Taken together, these converging discoveries paint an entirely new picture. A portrait of the Americas alive with dynamic human activity, innovation, and adaptation far, far earlier than we ever dared imagine. The story of human migration to this continent isn't simple. It's complex, it's messy, it's beautiful, and it's still being written. The White Sands footprints stand as an undeniable cornerstone of this revolutionary new narrative. Yes, the scientific debate will undoubtedly continue. Questions will be raised, new evidence will emerge. That's the nature of archaeology, the nature of science itself. But with each passing year, with each converging line of independent evidence, with each new radiocarbon date from different materials analyzed in different laboratories, the case for a confirmed human presence in the Americas 23,000 years ago grows not just stronger, but undeniably irrefutably solid. The footprints are real, the people were real, and they were here far earlier than we ever imagined possible. Thanks for watching. If you found this journey through deep time as fascinating as I did, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. What do you think about the overwhelming possibility that humans reached the Americas over 23,000 years ago? And how do you believe they actually got here? Were they courageous boat builders navigating treacherous Pacific waters? Or did they trek across the frozen Bering Land Bridge on foot? Maybe both? Let us know your theories and perspectives in the comments section. And stay tuned, because there are more incredible revelations from our mysterious ancient past coming your way very soon. Until next time, keep questioning, keep wondering, and keep exploring. Farewell, fellow time travelers.